You exist right now because of something that almost didn't happen. Not almost in the way we casually use that word, almost in the way that at one specific point in history, the difference between every human being alive today existing and none of us ever being born at all came down to a group of people so small you could fit every single one of them inside a single neighborhood, maybe fewer. This isn't mythology. This isn't a story someone made up to explain ancient history. The evidence is written directly into your DNA, sitting inside every cell of your body right now, quietly carrying the record of the night our species nearly ceased to exist. Let's start with what happened, and let's start with the scale of it, because until you understand the scale, the story doesn't hit the way it should. About 74,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra in what is now Indonesia, a volcano called Toba erupted. Not erupted the way volcanoes erupt today on the news, where we watch footage from a safe distance and feel vaguely concerned. Toba erupted with a force that modern scientists classify as a supervolcanic event, the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years of Earth's history. It released so much ash and debris into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun across enormous portions of the planet, triggering what researchers call a volcanic winter that may have lasted between 6 and 10 years. 6 to 10 years with dramatically reduced sunlight, collapsing plant life, collapsing food chains, temperatures dropping across the planet. Everything that living things, including humans, depended on for survival, suddenly gone or failing all at once. And humans, at that point, were not the powerful, globally distributed species we are today. We were a small, relatively fragile group of early Homo sapiens, almost entirely confined to Africa, already struggling with the normal challenges of prehistoric survival, without a supervolcano adding a decade of winter on top of everything else. Here's the part that should make you stop breathing for a second. Genetic researchers studying human DNA in the early 2000s made a discovery that changed how scientists understood our entire origin story. When they analyzed the genetic diversity of every human population alive today, they found something that shouldn't be there: a bottleneck. A point in our genetic history where the diversity in human DNA dropped so dramatically, so suddenly, that it suggests our entire species was reduced to an almost unimaginably small number of individuals. The estimates vary between researchers and the debate is ongoing, but some studies suggest the total number of breeding humans alive during this bottleneck may have dropped as low as somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 individuals. The entire human species, every person alive on Earth, reduced to a group that might not fill a single large sports stadium. Think about what that actually means. Every language that has ever existed traces back to that group. Every religion, every civilization, every scientific discovery, every piece of music ever composed, every human being you have ever loved or hated or passed on the street, all of it, every single thread of human history narrowly escaped being permanently erased during that period. You are not just descended from those survivors. In a very real genetic sense, you essentially are them. The diversity we have today across billions of people, across thousands of cultures and languages, grew from that impossibly small seed. Now, here's the rehook, because this is where the story gets even stranger. Those survivors didn't know they were survivors. They had no word for what was happening, no understanding of volcanic winters or atmospheric ash or food chain collapse. They just knew day after day that the world had become colder, darker, and more brutal than anything anyone in the group had ever experienced. Animals they hunted were disappearing. Plants they depended on were failing. Groups that had existed nearby were simply gone, with no explanation and no warning. Imagine trying to lead a group of people through that. Imagine being a parent during that period, watching your children go hungry in a world that had somehow stopped working, with absolutely no framework for understanding why. No science, no explanation, just an increasingly desperate attempt to find enough food to survive one more day in a world that seemed determined to end. And yet, some of them kept going. We don't know who they were. We don't know their names or what language they spoke or how they organized themselves. We don't know whether they were one group or several scattered groups. We don't know what decisions they made or what they sacrificed to keep enough people alive to eventually rebuild. All we have is the evidence they left behind in our DNA, a quiet genetic scar that says simply, we almost didn't make it. But here's what researchers have started to piece together about how any humans survived at all. Coastal environments may have been a crucial factor. Coastlines, particularly in southern Africa and parts of East Africa, offered something inland environments couldn't during the volcanic winter. Marine food sources, shellfish, fish, coastal plants were somewhat more insulated from the catastrophic effects of reduced sunlight than inland ecosystems. Evidence found at sites like Pinnacle Point in South Africa suggests that some human groups were already exploiting coastal resources before the Toba event, which may have placed them in exactly the right environment to survive when everything else collapsed. Small group size may have actually helped, paradoxically. A smaller group needs fewer resources to survive. A population of hundreds rather than thousands can persist on food sources that would be completely insufficient for a larger group. The very thing that made the bottleneck terrifying, how few humans remained, may also be part of the reason any humans survived at all. And behavioral flexibility. The humans who survived the Toba bottleneck were not physically stronger or biologically different from the ones who didn't. The evidence suggests they were more adaptable. They were willing to eat things they had never eaten before, move to environments they had never lived in, try strategies that had never been tried. The survivors weren't the toughest, they were the most willing to change. That detail should feel familiar, because it's the same trait that took those few thousand survivors and eventually turned them into 8 billion people spread across every corner of the planet. Not strength, not size, adaptability. Now here's the part that should genuinely sit with you after this video ends. Every single human alive today carries a genetic record of this event inside their body. The unusually low genetic diversity in our species compared to other great apes, the fact that chimpanzees in a single forest in Africa can carry more genetic diversity than all 8 billion humans on Earth combined, is a direct consequence of how close we came to disappearing. We are, in genetic terms, a remarkably similar species, not because we were always this way, but because almost everything that came before was erased. And what you see in every person alive today grew from that tiny, barely surviving group of humans who somehow held on through a decade of darkness and cold and starvation and kept producing the next generation. You are not just the product of millions of years of human evolution. You are specifically the product of the people who refused to stop surviving during the worst period in our species' existence. The next time you feel like circumstances are impossible, like the world has turned against you, like there is no way forward that makes sense, remember what is written in your own DNA. Your ancestors survived something that should have ended every one of them. They survived it without understanding it, without any guarantee it would end, without any knowledge that anyone would ever know what they went through. They survived it anyway, and because they did, you're here.